Hey, what's up guys? It's Chris with your Accelerated Weekly Training. So today we're going to be going over VWAP, which is the volume weighted average price and one of the key indicators that I use. So before we dive into that, go ahead and go over the disclaimer real quick. Go ahead and pause your screen and read it if you haven't done so yet. Again, just explaining that this is for information and education purposes only, and we are not recommending any trades or specific investments or financial advice. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. All right, so VWAP. So what is VWAP, right? Said volume weighted average price. So if you're not familiar with this, it is exactly what the name says. So it's a moving, it's kind of like a moving average, right? Except for it tracks volume and over the course of time. You generally have an anchor point, which is going to be a certain time that it starts calculating this, and it's essentially, like I said, it's volume weighted, right? So it's that accumulation of volume over the specific time frame that you want to track that volume, right? So you can set it up on Sierra chart. You can set that up to be however you want. You can do it over the course of 2 hours, 8 hour day, a 24-hour day. You can set up multiple to track electronic trading hours. That would be like the British pound that starts trading at 3 a.m. and then another one that starts the U.S. session at 8, and how they interact with each other. I traded and used that for quite a while, actually. But anyways, so I kind of wanted to go over the basics of it, right? So essentially, what I like to use it with is I like to use it is in conjunction with market profile, essentially as a value. It establishes the day's developing value in tandem with the market profile, which is kind of the already established value, right? And so we actually have a bit of established value from the previous session's VWAP as well, which we'll go over here in a second. But again, I think I mentioned in the market profile video that I like to, and I think it's important to have different anchors that you can establish value and importance to throughout the day, whether it's like something simple like a moving average that you're gauging price, trend, and strength or weakness and against or regards to, or something like this. Now, one of the huge things that I gain value from when I use VWAP in tandem with the market profile is it really gives me a good idea as to how we're setting up to be able to move outside of value and outside of balance into a trending scenario, right? So if we figure that if we're in balance and we're consolidating, right, there's only so much opportunity there, right? And then we talked about how the market goes from towards value and away from value and hangs out in value and has price excursions away from value whenever price begins to trend. So being able to identify when that's happening or when it looks like that's happening, and then being able to gauge the strength of the trend and how well something's trending, and having essentially a set of, like I said, the developing value during the day or whatever time frame you're looking at, again, gives us another reference point. So let's go ahead and get into it a little bit. So what this is, what you're seeing here is this would be essentially the end of the previous day, right? So this would be the established value price of the day, and a lot of times this will be similar to the volume profile. So the volume profile is going to have a point of control where most of the volume was traded for that day, and a lot of times these prices will be very similar, right? Not only that, but you'll have the value areas of the volume profile, right? And even the market profile, but this is more related to volume, will be, the value area high will kind of match this first standard deviation of the VWAP itself. And so this is like a +1, the first standard deviation, and this to the upside, and this is the minus, the negative to the downside. So essentially your value area is in here, right? So when we move outside of those standard deviation bands, which is all this is, these are bands that are extended outside of the VWAP and just give us, again, another point of reference to how well price is trending, right? So if you consider price to be inside of the first standard deviation bands of each side, right, then price is technically considered like to be inside of value, or, you know, kind of a consolidation type environment until it breaks outside of that and moves out of value. And so what you'll see is there's certain times where, like back here, you know, price found support at the VWAP, came up, tested the first standard deviation band, and broke out outside of that, outside of the first standard deviation band. So this is price having a price excursion out of value, right? So these are the type of trend scenarios that we're looking for whenever we're trading a trend style strategy, right? And so identifying when it comes back inside of value can give us a heads up and say, hey, market conditions are changing or deteriorating, and we may want to take another look, or, you know, take profit or take money off the table, or look and see what's happening, whatever your strategy calls for. But again, it's just, these are reference points. And so, so that's why I like them. So another thing that I like to do, just like we look at the point of control, is looking at the previous day's VWAP and how well price is trading away from or towards that. Because a lot of times, well, I mean, definitely, for sure, 100% of the time, when we have a reversion to the mean, when price moves back towards value and it's not moving away from value, oftentimes that previous day's VWAP and point of control will get tested, right? And so that price action that happens around there ends up being pretty important to make strategic moves on, as to whether or not the move is going to continue, or whether the move is kind of done, or it's reversing, right? We're pausing back to value, hanging out, and then going to move outside of that again. So anyway, so that's what we see here. We see the price closed. We opened the next day, and price continued to move away from the VWAP, from the previous day's VWAP. Not only that, but it found support at the current day's VWAP. And so this is even though it's a trending environment, it's still a slow trend, right? There's nothing crazy happening here. But again, we have something to reference it to, right? It's not just hanging out, well, the trend's just kind of going well, just whatever. It's like, no, we can see that it's finding support here at VWAP. We understand the importance of that. We understand, because this is the developing value for the day, right? So we see that price is still being rejected away from the developing value to the upside, thinking, okay, that's a positive or bullish, you know, kind of sign or cue, right? Depending on, you know, whether you're long and or it's still being aggressive, you want to buy, you're trying to get a buy point for the day, right? And then also when price breaks out of those bands, as far as when we talk about, you know, the trend lines, whenever they get a little bit too wild, right? And they start screaming to the upside, then you get a point, it goes, okay, it's a good time to maybe take some money off the table, because things are accelerating faster than they're probably going to be able to be maintained, right? So the other thing that I wanted to cover too, oh, I spilled water all over my mouse, nice, was a higher time frame. So this is a daily VWAP, so I like to track how that relates to the previous day, but I also like to track the monthly VWAP and the weekly in regards to the day as well, whenever we're looking more at the long-term trend. So let's see if this is the right one. Yeah, so what we have here is we have the black is going to be your monthly VWAP, right? So that ends, you know, 30 days, is 30 days in length. The magenta line is your daily, and then you have the red line, which is your weekly. And so what I'll watch is, like here, as price came up, tested the monthly VWAP. So we were in kind of a downtrend, right? Because otherwise we should be above the monthly VWAP. The intermediate trend is down. We found resistance at the monthly VWAP, and it was rejected lower from there. Not only was it rejected lower from there, but it was rejected underneath the weekly VWAP, right? And you can see here that we had been trending higher up to this point, right? So that's why I like to watch the day, right? So we go, okay, price almost tested the previous day here, rejected higher, moved higher up into this major resistance area, came back down, tested the previous day's VWAP on its way lower, right? So during that day, intraday, this is a warning sign saying it's getting real, right? Things are no longer trending to the upside at this point, right? And we can also see that in conjunction with these trend lines being broken down here. And so once we get underneath the weekly VWAP, we have a new, essentially, we have a new resistance level that we would need to break out to the upside, right? we were able to test the weekly VWAP. We're not able to come back and test at least the day's VWAP. That doesn't happen before it's rejected lower and has broken the last remaining trend line as price moves lower. So anyways, all that to say was, again, it gives us other points of reference rather than just having just using simple trend lines and the market profile. We're able to check this out in real time, specifically with the daily VWAP, but also with the weekly VWAPs. We can see how we have a visual representation of how well the market is trading on other time frames, right? We talk about multi time frame analysis as well. This is something that I find of value, right? So we can see here, as price broke lower, but didn't break the previous highs, right? We came back up at the end of the week. We tested the weekly VWAP, came down, consolidated, and you can see if you drew a line across here that price broke above the weekly VWAP, the previous weekly VWAP, right? And started moving higher. Here, we were also trending above the previous day, so that would have been like Friday, right? We were trending above the Friday's VWAP, and so we go bullish, bullish. So these things right here are going to give us earlier signals, earlier cues that the environment, the underlying environment is changing, and we should shift our strategy and we can move to a different direction, right? In conjunction with like this trend line here that said, hey, this broke to the upside. That could be signal one. We start moving above the previous VWAPs and additional support from the price action when we're using, when we're looking at just the charts and the candles and the kind of like, not the underlying, but the primary support and resistance levels. And again, conjunction with the market profile and now with the VWAP, you should be able to start to see how these things in combination can become quite powerful when setting your directional bias and kind of just getting in sync with the market and being able to move with the flow, which is what allows us to make money, right? So anyways, a little bit longer on that one, but very important. And I look forward to diving into that one quite a bit as well. I love VWAP. I've been using it for a long time. So yeah, hopefully you got some value out of that. Happy trading, guys.